David Miller woke before dawn, as he did almost every Saturday. He moved quietly through his small house by the lake, careful not to disturb the soft hum of nature still stirring outside. The old wooden floor creaked under his slippers, but in that gentle sound he found comfort. He loved the way the house felt in the early morning, empty, peaceful, full of promise. He poured himself a cup of coffee and walked onto the back porch. The steam curled up in the cool air like a friendly ghost. Beyond the porch rail, the lake lay smooth as glass. Reflecting the pale pink sky, he took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the warmth and the taste. He gazed across the water at the tall pines that framed the lake's edge. In that moment, he felt as if he had the whole world to himself. At 65, having taught elementary school for 30 years, David enjoyed these simple pleasures. Most of all, fishing had been his grandfather's hobby, and he remembered the feel of the rod in his small hands. The way his grandfather leaned over him to guide his casting. Now, every Saturday, David honored that memory by sitting in his little boat with a pole in hand and the lake all to himself. After finishing his coffee, he stepped inside to gather his gear. He carried a faded tackle box, its metal latch worn, but reliable. Inside were all his favorite lures, each one a small memory. There was the bright red spinner his grandson had picked out for him one Christmas, the green and jello jig he had found on a family camping trip, and the sleek silver spoon that had once fooled a big bass into biting. He packed his hat, a weathered cap that shielded his eyes from the sun, and a folded blanket for warmth in case the wind picked up. His boots made soft thuds on the hardwood as he walked to the back door. Outside, the air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. David paused to breathe it in. He unlocked the shed and pulled out the old rowboat. The boat was small but sturdy, painted white with patches of blue where he had touched up scrapes over the years. He carried it down a short slope to the water and set it gently at the edge. He pushed it in until it floated free. Then he climbed in, his movements careful so he would not tip over. He pushed off from the shore and began rowing toward his favorite fishing spot, a little point of land that jutted into the lake. The paddles whispered against the water. Mist rose from the lake in thin ribbons, twisting around the boat. Rowed slowly as if he did not want to disturb the hush of the morning. A heron took flight from the reeds, its wings wide and graceful, and he watched it glide low over the water before landing on a far bank. The sky grew lighter as the sun peeked above the trees. David felt a quiet joy in that moment, a sense of connection to something larger than himself. Each week, he looked forward to these hours alone. He set his boat where the water was deep enough for bass, but shallow enough to let the sun warm it. He tied his boat to a short post driven into the lake bed. Then he baited his hook and cast out his line. The float bobbed gently, and he settled back in the boat, hands folded in his lap, eyes half closed. He felt at peace in his own world, far from deadlines, lesson plans, and the busy school halls he had left behind. The local homeowners association had been a small presence in his life since he moved here 5 years ago. Meeting he attended in the community hall, a small room, with folding chairs and a whiteboard covered in rules. He had listened politely as board members spoke about lawn heights, mailbox colors, and the proper way to hang holiday lights. He did not mind following rules. He had always been a law-abiding person, paid his dues on time each quarter, and attended meetings only when he had to. Over the years, he'd received newsletters with bullet points about community events, pool, hours, and occasional reminders about noise levels. One newsletter mentioned that any use of the lake required written approval from the HOA board. David had tucked that line away in his mind, but did not worry much. After all, he owned the lot and the lake. He had checked the deed and the survey. There was no question that the land, including the water, was his property. He assumed the HOA included the lake by mistake, and he planned to talk to them one day to clear up the misunderstanding. Still, small tensions remained. At times, he found an HOA notice slipped under his door, warning against unauthorized structures or property modifications. Once, someone from the board asked him if he planned to build a new dock. He told them no, that he only used the small, old dock that came with the land. They seemed satisfied and did not press further. Had gone out. Ad ya what ad? What a red bet my ad I wa by I'm his private property so closely, he wished they took more interest in neighborly events, like gatherings at the community hall or volunteer cleanup days for the lakeshore. As the sun climbed higher, David felt a tug on his line. He sat up straight, relaxed but alert. He reeled in slowly, enjoying the gentle weight at the end of his line. A small bass broke the surface, silver and strong. He lifted it from the water, admired its dark stripes, and then carefully released. The fish slipped back into the lake, leaving ripples that spread out until they faded into stillness. He smiled at the sight. This was exactly why he came here every week. He baited his hook again and cast. The hook flew through the air, landed with a soft plunk, and the float bobbed once more. He leaned back and let the warmth of the sun brush his face. He recalled the first time he saw the lake, on the day he closed on the property. He had wandered down to the water's edge, heart pounding, feeling the breeze on his skin and hearing the frogs sing in the reeds. He knew then this place would be his refuge, a safe place to find peace and joy in simple things. David's phone buzzed in his pocket. He shrugged and ignored it. For now, he wanted nothing but the quiet of the lake and his own thoughts. He watched as a family of ducks glided past, the mother leading her ducklings in a neat line. He remembered watching his own children at that age, small bodies waddling after their mother, full of curiosity and wonder. His children were grown now, living in cities far away. Missed them, but he loved that they had grown into good people. Fishing had always been a chance to remember lessons his father taught him: patience, respect for nature, the importance of finding calm in every day. Another tug jolted him back to the present, swept the rod tip up, and the line went tight. He grinned, braced himself, and began to reel. The fish pulled hard, and the boat rocked gently. Worked the rod carefully. After a moment, the fish slowed, and he guided it into the net. He lifted the net into the boat and set the bass on the seat. He marveled at its strength, its glossy scales, and the way its muscles worked beneath its skin. Then he reached over the side and let it slip back into the water. He leaned back once more, hands behind his head, watching the clouds drift by. This was his week's triumph, catching and releasing the lake's fish, breathing in the morning air, feeling alive. He did not yet know how that peace would be tested soon, when the HOA board's rules and warnings grew louder. But on this morning, he felt no fear, only gratitude. He was the owner of this land, the caretaker of this lake, and he would do whatever it took to protect his quiet world. He tied a loose knot in his fishing line and waited, happy to simply watch the gentle rise and fall of the water beneath him. David returned home that Monday afternoon feeling light and content. He had packed up his fishing gear, washed the boat, and tucked everything back in the shed. He looked forward to breakfast with his dog, Buddy, and a quiet cup of tea in the sunroom. He unlocked the screen door, and Buddy barked happily, wagging his tail. David patted the dog's head and smiled. He took off his boots and wiped his hands on an old towel. Later, as he settled in his favorite chair, his eyes fell on the mailbox by the front door. He almost forgot to check it, since most HOA notices arrive by email these days. He stood, stretched, and went outside. The mailbox lid creaked as he lifted it. Inside was a single white envelope with the HOA's official seal. He frowned. He had not expected any mail from them so soon. He carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen table. He poured a glass of water, sat down, and tore the envelope open. His heart sank when he read the words "Notice of Violation" at the top. Below, in formal language, the board accused him of unauthorized use of community lake area and failure to obtain written approval for recreational activities. They warned that unless he ceased all fishing and removed any personal property like boats or docks from the lake within 7 days, they would levy fines starting at $200 per day and could involve law enforcement. David reread the letter, his mind spinning. This was his private lake. He flipped through the pages, searching for any mistake or misprint. The letter quoted a clause from the HOA rules, Section 12.4, use of water areas reserved for community members who follow approval protocols. But David owned the land. His deed said so. His property line ran across the middle of the lake. He felt a surge of anger mixed with confusion. Who did these people think they were? He folded the letter and sat quietly. Duddy settled at his feet, wagging his tail. David scratched behind the dog's ears without thinking, lost in his own thoughts. He thought about the meeting that first year, where he asked about the lake. He had assumed the HOA's mention of the water was a harmless oversight. No, it looked like they meant business. He wondered how many other owners they bothered like this. He decided to call the HOA president, a woman named Karen. He picked up the phone and dialed the number on the letter. It rang twice before she answered. "Hello, Karen speaking," she said, in a crisp tone. "Hello, Karen," David began, keeping his voice calm. "This is David Miller on Lakeview Drive. I received a notice today about unauthorized use of the lake. I own this property and I have fished here for 5 years. I believe there's been a misunderstanding." There was a pause, and Karen replied, "Mr. Miller, the board voted last month to require written permission for any private recreational activities on the lake. We sent notices to all members, including you." She sounded firm, almost cold. David frowned. "Excuse me? I never saw any notice. I didn't know the board could change rules about privately owned land. I looked at my deed when I bought the place. Clearly includes the lake." "Did you check the county records?" "Sorry, David," Karen said, her voice steady. "The board's decision stands. Please comply within 7 days or face fines." He closed his eyes and took a slow breath. "Karen, I value peace in this community, but I know my rights. I will need proof of your claim. I will also review my deed, and if needed, get legal advice. I ask that you hold off on any fines until we discuss this further." There was another pause. "We will review it," she said curtly, then hung up. David sat back in his chair, feeling unsettled. He turned to Buddy, who looked up at him with soft eyes. He patted the dog's head again. He needed a plan. He would not let a misunderstanding turn into a conflict. He would gather his documents first. He spent the afternoon in his study, surrounded by folders and papers. He pulled out his property deed, the official survey map, and old tax records. He laid them out on the desk and examined them carefully. His deed plainly described the lake, all the way to the center of the water. The survey map, drawn by a licensed surveyor, had a line crossing the lake at the halfway point exactly where his property ended and his neighbor's began. There was no mention of any common property or HOA control beyond the shoreline. He felt his confidence grow as he read the words on the papers. This land was his. The water belonged to him. He would not yield to unfair rules. But he needed to present his case properly. He decided to visit the county clerk's office the next day to confirm his deed's details in the public record. Then he would talk to a lawyer if necessary. The next morning, David drove his old pickup truck to the county building. He parked in the lot, noting the other cars, some new, some old like his. He carried his folder inside and approached the records desk. A clerk greeted him kindly and helped him pull the official recorded deed and survey from the archives. It matched his copies exactly. He asked the clerk if there were any other documents showing HOA claims to the lake. The clerk searched but found nothing, no easements, no covenants, no additional declarations. Just the deed and the survey. David thanked the clerk and left with printed copies. He felt relieved. Now he had the public record to back him up. He returned home and placed the printouts on his desk. Then he called the number of a local attorney specializing in property disputes. He explained the situation briefly. The lawyer agreed to review his documents and talk to him that afternoon. The fee was reasonable. David paid it gladly. Later, the lawyer, Ms. Ortega, came to his home. She was a tall woman in her 40s with a friendly smile and sharp eyes. She greeted him warmly and followed him into the study. David showed her the deed, the survey, and the HOA's notice. She read through everything, nodding thoughtfully. "Mr. Miller," she said finally, "your deed clearly includes the lake. There is no covenanted right by the HOA to restrict your use. If they fine you or try to enforce this rule, you can seek an injunction. But I suggest first sending them a formal letter demanding they retract the notice and apologize for any inconvenience. That often resolves these disputes without going to court." He breathed a sigh of relief. "That sounds good," he said. "I'd rather not fight. I just want peace." Ms. Ortega drafted the letter on her laptop, laying out the facts: his ownership, the survey, county records, and the HOA's lack of any legal basis. She asked David to review it, and he agreed the wording was clear and firm, yet polite. She printed the letter on her law office stationery and signed it. David felt a surge of hope. He would deliver the letter tomorrow. That evening he sat on his porch with Buddy. The sky glowed orange from the setting sun. Thought about how peaceful mornings on the lake usually were. He hoped the board would back down. He treasured these moments, quiet, gentle, full of simple joy. He did not want conflict in his retirement years. On Wednesday morning, he drove to the HOA office in the community hall. A small desk sat near the entrance, and a board member, Mr. Lee, greeted him. David handed over the envelope. Lee looked surprised and accepted it. He said, "We will pass this to the board at tonight's meeting." David nodded and left without another word. At home, he waited. He read a book, took Buddy for a walk, and boiled water for tea. Late in the afternoon, his phone rang. It was Karen. She sounded less certain now. "David," she said, "the board has received your letter. You'll review it and respond in writing within 3 days." He thanked her and hung up.
Wow.
The line felt colder than before. At least there was no mention of fines. He returned to his chair by the window and watched the breeze shake the branches of a maple tree. Buddy lay at his feet, content. David felt a cautious relief. He knew the board could accept the facts or stick to their position. He hoped they would choose peace and fairness. If not, he was ready. He would protect his rights and his lake. And next Saturday, he would fish again no matter what rules they tried to enforce. David rose before sunrise again, determined not to let the turmoil steal his peace. He prepared his gear quietly, Wendy the cat brushing against his legs as he stepped into the kitchen, filled a thermos with coffee and placed it in the truck. He waved to Buddy, who watched him from the porch. As he drove down the gravel road toward the lake, his heart pounded not from excitement over fishing, but from the worry of what might happen today. He reached his property and parked near the boat launch. The sky was pale blue, edged with rosy light. He unloaded his old rowboat and set it in the water with his usual care. He climbed in and began to row toward the spot he knew so well. As he was about to tie his boat, headlights appeared on the road above the shore. He heard an engine rumble and saw a sheriff's SUV roll down the slope. 2 deputies stepped out, badges gleaming on their chests. David's heartbeat sped up. His mind raced back to the letter threatening to call law enforcement. He held his fishing rod tightly, sweat cooling on his palms despite the morning chill. The deputies walked to the water's edge and called to him. Their voices were calm but firm. "Sir, please come ashore," one said. He guided the boat toward the shore. His oars made soft splashes in the still water. He tied the boat, climbed out, and began to explain. "Good morning, officers. I'm David Miller. I own this property, including this lake. I came to fish, as I have for years." The deputies exchanged looks. One nodded. "Mr. Miller, we are responding to a complaint that someone was trespassing on private property. The HOA said you did not have permission to fish here." His tone was polite but serious. David stood tall, despite the shaking in his legs. "I understand, but I own this land. The lake is mine. The HOA sent me a letter, but I have my deed and survey. I can show you if needed." The other deputy produced a notepad. "Do you have proof of ownership on you?" David patted his shirt pocket. "Yes, I always carry a copy of my deed and the county survey." I also have the original deed in my truck, the deputy said. Please fetch them. We want to resolve this quickly. He walked to his truck and retrieved a folder. His hands trembled slightly as he handed the deed and survey to the deputies. They examined the papers. The fatherly deputy stroked his chin. Your deed states you own the land up to the center of the lake. That's clear. The survey matches. You have any other records? David nodded. I have the county certified. Copy 2. He fetched another set of printed papers. The deputies compared both. They looked up at him. Stopimena, these documents are convincing. We will not issue any citation, but the HOA is free to make complaints again if they wish. He exhaled, relief washing over him. Thank you. I hope they will stop calling the police once they see the facts. The deputy said, We advise you to sort this out with your HOA. If they complain again without cause, you can document it and ask us not to respond unless there's an emergency. He handed the papers back. David nodded. I appreciate that. Thank you for your time. The deputies tipped their hats and walked back to their SUV. They left as quietly as they had arrived, their tires crunching on the gravel. David watched their vehicle disappear before he returned to his boat. He climbed in and sat down, chest heaving as he tried to calm his racing heart. The mist still rose from the water in pale wisps. The world felt soft and calm again, as if the morning had forgiven him and the deputies both. He cast his line, but his mind churned. The HOA had called the police over a private lake. They charged him based on their own rules, not on law. The deputies had let him go this time, but what if they came again next week? He could not live every weekend waiting for a police visit. He needed a lasting solution. He reeled in slowly, unhooked the lure, and cast again. The float bobbed on the water, held the rod with 2 hands, and looked across the lake. On the far shore, he saw his neighbor's silhouette, a man named Carl, drinking coffee on his dock. Carl waved, and David forced a smile. He wanted friendly nods, not sympathy. A tug snapped him back. He reeled in a small fish and released it. He caught another, then another. Each catch felt like a small victory, proof that he belonged here. He let the line drop again, leaned back, and breathed deeply. The sun rose higher, warming his skin and brightening the pines green. Still, the tension nagged at him. He needed to gather more evidence photos, perhaps showing the clear property line. He decided to row to the far side where the county survey markers stood. There, he could photograph the markers, the water, and any grass or reeds growing on his side versus the neighbors. If the HOA ever tried again, he would have visual proof. He rowed toward the markers, each stroke steady. The boat cut through the water like a knife through silk. He tied up near a metal post with a small plaque indicating the property line. He photographed it from different angles, capturing both the marker and the lake. He noted the date and time on his camera. He recorded a short video explaining what the marker meant. He whispered to himself, "This is mine. I own this." Satisfied, he rowed back to his spot. He unhooked another fish, watching it swim away. His confidence grew with each ripple. The morning had tested him, but also taught him the power of preparedness. He thought of the deputies' kind eyes and measured tone. They deserved clarity too, but their job was to enforce the law, not the HOA's internal rules. By midday, he had enough. He packed up his gear and cleaned the boat. He rowed back to shore and carried the boat up the slope. He locked it in the shed and returned to the house. Inside, he laid out his photos, videos, and documents on his desk. He planned to send these as an addendum to the lawyer's letter, so the board could see every angle of the truth. As he worked, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from Karen, the HOA president. Deputies called off. "We need to meet." He stared at the message. Expected formal letters, not casual texts. But maybe this was progress. Maybe they wanted to talk things over face to face. He texted back, "I agree. Please suggest a time." His thumbs paused. Before he hit send, as if he sensed the moment's importance, he looked around his study at the neatly arranged papers. This home, this lake, and this desk were his domain. He would defend them, but he would also seek peace. Later that afternoon, he drove to the community hall. The sun slanted low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Inside, a folding table stood in the center of the room. Several HOA board members sat around it, including Karen and Mr. Lee. They looked nervous as he entered. He greeted them with a nod and sat down, placing his folder on the table. Karen cleared her throat. David, thank you for coming. We received the additional documents. It's clear you own the lake. He looked at her steadily. Thank you for reviewing them. Hope we can resolve this today. Another board member spoke up. We misinterpreted the rules. We thought the lake was part of common property. We're sorry. He felt both relief and caution. I appreciate the apology. I also asked that the HOA officially retract the violation. Notice and confirm in writing that I can use my lake without interference. They agreed, their faces earnest. They promised to send an official letter and update the HOA records. David nodded, felt the weight lift from his shoulders. He stood up and shook hands with each of them. As he drove home in the fading light, he thought of the morning's chill and the deputy's quiet kindness. He thought of the gentle ripples on the lake and the sturdy survey markers. He thought of peace regained and justice served. He arrived home to Buddy's excited barks and Wendy's soft meow. He smiled and scratched his dog behind the ears. He poured himself a cup of tea and sat on the porch. The sky glowed with amber. And rose, he watched the first stars appear, felt gratitude for clarity, for courage, and for the simple things that made life feel whole. He looked forward to tomorrow's dawn, to the promise of calm water, a fishing rod in hand, and a world that knew his right to fish in his own lake. David slept well that night, comforted by the knowledge that the HOA had finally recognized his ownership of the lake. In the morning, sunlight streamed through his bedroom window and painted his walls in warm gold. He brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table, Buddy curled at his feet. He opened the official retraction letter from the HOA. The words were clear. The violation notice was void, and he had full permission to fish in his lake. He smiled, feeling relief wash over him like a gentle wave, yet a quiet thought nagged at his mind. If the board had only now discovered the truth, how long had they been misusing his property? He remembered stories of board members drifting across the water in a small rowboat, invited guests to his shoreline, and casually casting lines into his fish-rich waters. He had seen them sometimes, laughing and chatting as if the lake belonged to everyone. That small injustice burned in his chest. He realized he needed to learn the full story, who had been trespassing, how often, and why no one had spoken up before. He decided to investigate, cleared his desk and laid out a fresh notebook. He wrote, "Find proof of HOA trespassing." Under it, he jotted ideas, interview neighbors, check security cameras, review past meeting minutes, search for dates and photos. He sipped his coffee slowly, tasting its rich flavor, and planned his next steps. He would start with neighbors, people who lived around the lake and might have seen board members using his dock. That afternoon, he walked down the gravel road to his next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patel. She was a retired nurse and an early riser like him. Her yard was neat, with roses in bloom and 2 wind chimes tinkling in the breeze. He knocked softly, and she opened the door, smiling warmly. "David, good morning. How are you?" He explained his plan. "I want to know if you ever saw anyone from the HOA fishing here. I believe they used my dock for years." Her eyes widened. "Oh my, yes," she exclaimed. Last summer I saw 3 board members once, casting lines and chattering away. They used that old wooden dock. I thought it was a shared pier at first." "Do you remember when?" he asked gently. Mrs. Patel tapped her chin. "It was July, during the 4th of July picnic. They did not come to the picnic, they just showed up here. I saw them again in October, fishing at dawn." She shook her head. "I didn't say anything because I thought the lake was communal, like they said. But I always wondered why they never invited other neighbors." David thanked her and took notes. Next, he visited Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, a few doors down. That emotion activated. Security camera by their garage. When he knocked, Mrs. Nguyen offered him a seat in her living room. "David, what brings you by?" he explained again. She smiled kindly. "Let me show you something." She fetched her tablet and pulled up video clips. They watched footage from last August, Two men in polo shirts and name badges, laughing as they climbed onto David's dock with coolers and fishing rods. They leaned over the side, dropping lines into the water. The timestamp showed 6:15 a.m. David felt a surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what he needed. "Thank you," he said, his heart pounding with excitement. "May I have copies of these clips?" "Of course," she said, tapping the screen. "I'll email them too." You today. With two strong leads of witness accounts and video evidence, he moved to the next step, gathering written records. He walked back to his house, Buddy trailing behind. He opened his laptop and logged into the HOA website. He found meeting minutes archived online. He downloaded minutes from the past 5 years. He read each one carefully, searching for any mention of lake use or board fishing trips. By late afternoon, his eyes ached from reading. He discovered a note from March 2 years ago, board to consider an annual fishing event for members at the lake. There was no record of the event actually happening, but the idea was there. In June of that same year, the minutes said, "Board, members will fish privately at their discretion." Those words hit him hard. The board had quietly approved themselves to fish on his private dock. Behind closed doors, while keeping neighbors in the dark, he printed these pages. He also printed the video timestamps and Mrs. Patel's handwritten note. His desk was now a neat scatter of evidence, legal documents, photos, video stills, meeting minutes, and personal testimonies. He felt a sense of righteous purpose. He would present this to the newly appointed board members, ensuring such secrecy would never happen again. That evening, he emailed all the evidence to Ms. Ortega, his lawyer. He wrote a short message. "Please review these items. I plan to request that the HOA formally acknowledge these trespasses and adopt transparent rules for any future lake. I also ask for their reimbursement for any legal or investigative costs." He clicked send and sat back, exhausted but determined. The next day, he heard back from his lawyer. Ms. Ortega wrote, "Your evidence is strong. Recommend drafting a formal demand letter to be sent to all HOA members outlining the facts and requesting corrective action. If they refuse, we can consider further legal steps, including filing a claim for trespass and breach of fiduciary duty." Agreed, and asked her to proceed. They worked together that afternoon to prepare the letter, detailing each incident, with dates, names, and supporting documents. The letter was firm but professional, emphasizing his desire for peaceful resolution and community harmony. On Saturday morning, he had another plan. He would fish as usual, but he wanted one more piece of proof: his own journal of fishing trips. With dates and times to compare against the board's activities, he filled his thermos and packed his tackle box. He waved goodbye to Buddy and drove to the lake. The dawn was cool and quiet. Mist drifted across the water. He launched his boat and glided out to his usual spot. As he cast his line, he thought of the board members on his dock, unaware that their secret was about to be exposed to the whole community. He fished for a while, catching a few small bass, but his mind was on the upcoming meeting. The HOA's annual general meeting was scheduled for next week. He planned to attend in person, present his evidence, and speak before all members. He imagined the surprised faces, the shuffle of papers, the board members' uneasy glances. He felt nervous, but ready. Had done the work, gathered the proof, and sought legal guidance. Now it was time for the truth to come out. Back at home, he prepared his presentation. He organized his documents in a binder, adding clear labels and tabs. He wrote a bullet point outline of his remarks: introduction, deed confirmation, eyewitness, accounts, video evidence, meeting minutes proof, and formal requests. He practiced speaking in front of a mirror until his words felt steady. He reminded himself to stay calm and respectful. He would ask for an apology, reimbursement, new transparent procedures, and possibly a community fishing day open to all, if that was what the neighbors wanted. On the evening before the meeting, he took a long walk with Buddy around the lake's perimeter. They passed the survey markers and the wooden dock. He knelt on the dock, running his fingers over its weathered boards. He remembered the first time he tied his boat here 5 years ago, dreaming of peaceful mornings. Now, He stood on the same dock with purpose, ready to protect what was his while inviting the community to share in fairness. He looked out across the water, trees glowing in the sunset. The air smelled of pine and earth. Buddy barked softly and he laughed. He felt a strong sense of justice and community.
Ow.
He hoped the HOA would join him in making the lake a place of openness, not secrecy. He whispered to the wind, "This lake belongs to all, but we must respect each other's rights." Then he rose, patted Buddy, and headed home. As he walked back through the tall grass, he felt a quiet excitement for tomorrow. He was no longer simply a man fishing on his private lake. He was a homeowner who stood up for his rights and inspired others to do the same. He looked forward to sharing his story, not to blame, but to build a stronger, fairer community. And when the morning came, he knew he would step into that community hall with confidence, evidence in hand, ready to turn wrongs into right. David arrived early at the community hall the next morning. The sky was pale blue, and the air felt fresh, as if the day itself were cheering him on. He carried his binder of evidence carefully, as though it were treasure. Inside he had his deed, the county survey, Mrs. Patel's notes, the Nguyen videos, and the printed HOA meeting minutes. He placed the binder on a folding table near the front, then took a deep breath and walked into the room. Chairs faced a long table where the HOA board sat. Neighbors filled the seats, some curious, some friendly, some wary. He recognized familiar faces. Mrs. Patel, Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, even Carl from across the lake. They nodded encouragement. Karen, the HOA president, looked uneasy. Her shoulders were tense, and she fiddled with a pen. A few board members glanced at one another. David took his place at the podium, smoothed his shirt, cleared his throat, and began in a calm voice. "Thank you all for coming. I am here to talk about my right to use my own lake, and to ask for the community's help in making sure we all respect each other's property." He opened his binder and held up the deed. 5 years ago I bought this land, including the lake, my deed, and the county survey here. He tapped the survey, showed that the water up to the center belongs to me. A murmur of surprise passed through the room. He flipped pages. Then I got a violation notice from the HOA saying I needed permission to fish. It led to sheriff deputies coming when I went out on my boat. They let me go, but it was stressful. He looked directly at Karen. "I don't want conflict. I want friendship. But I also want fairness." He set the deed down and picked up Mrs. Patel's note. Here, Mrs. Patel saw 3 board members. "Fishing on my dock during the 4th of July picnic 2 years ago." He passed the note to the board. Karen's lips pressed tight. "And here are video clips from the Nguyen's recorded last August," he continued, showing time-stamped stills. "They were on my dock at dawn." The neighbors gasped softly. He saw shock on their faces. This was news to them. David took out the printed HOA minutes. These are minutes from March 2 years ago. "Board to consider annual fishing event in June that year. Board members will fish privately at their discretion. They plan these trips without telling any of you." The room grew quiet. He spoke gently. "They were using my property as if it were common ground. That is not right." He closed the binder and looked around. "I'm here to ask the board to admit this mistake. I want them to apologize, reimburse my legal and investigation costs, and agree to clear public rules about lake use. Community wants a shared event. Let us vote together." He paused. "I want peace. I want trust. I want us to be fair." Karen swallowed hard. She glanced at Mr. Lee, then stood. "David, on behalf of the HOA board, I apologize. Our own covenants and caused you distress? We're sorry." Her voice sounded genuine. A few board members nodded. Some neighbors murmured in approval. A neighbor near the back raised a hand. "I move that the board reimburse David for his legal and investigation costs." Another neighbor seconded. They voted by a show of hands. The motion passed. Then another neighbor proposed forming a committee, half homeowners, half board members, to draft transparent lake use guidelines. The hands went up again, and the committee was approved. Karen turned back to David. "We will issue a formal apology letter, reimburse your costs within 30 days, and we will follow the new process for any future lake events. We commit to full transparency." She smiled faintly. Warm surge in his chest, gratitude, but also relief. After the meeting, neighbors approached him with congratulations. Mrs. Patel hugged him. "I'm so glad you stood up for what's right," she said. Mr. Nguyen handed him a USB drive. "Here are all our security clips from the past year. You can keep them as backup," he offered. Carl patted his shoulder. "Next Saturday, we'll meet on your dock for coffee, open invitation." David laughed, the tension melting away. Back at home, he sat on his porch with Buddy and sipped tea. He thought of the morning sunlight in the hall, of the neighbors' faces as they learned the truth. He thought of the board's apology and the promise of fairness. He felt proud, not because he had one, but because he had shown that honest discussion and clear evidence could heal a community. He looked at Buddy, who yawned and blinked sleepily. "We did it, boy," he said softly. He thought of the lake shining in the sun, of the survey markers standing firm, of the dock where so much had happened. He dreamed of next weekend, a community gathering, laughter echoing across the water, lines cast into the lake by old and young alike. That night he wrote in his journal, "Today I learned that standing up for your rights does not mean cutting others out. It means bringing light to what is hidden and inviting everyone to walk in full view. I hope our lake will be a place of friendship and respect from now on." He closed the journal, looked out at the dark silhouette of trees against the stars, and felt a deep peace. A few days later, the HOA mailed him the apology letter and a check covering his costs. They also posted the new lake use rules on their website and in the community hall. The rules were simple. Any shared event required notice to all homeowners 30 days in advance, a vote by majority, and clear boundaries marked. Private owners retained full rights to their own property. He read them carefully and nodded in satisfaction. This was fairness in writing. On his next Saturday fishing trip, he carried extra folding chairs. As he launched his boat, he saw neighbors gathering on the dock. Some brought pastries, some coffee, some blankets. The sun warmed their faces as they greeted him with smiles. He welcomed them aboard, handed out chairs, and showed them his favorite fishing spots. He explained how to tie a knot, how to watch the float, how to feel the gentle tug of a bass. Children laughed as they caught small fish, and older neighbors shared memories of their own childhood outings. David watched the ripples spread across the lake from each cast. He saw people talking, sharing stories, and looking out for one another. He felt the warm breeze on his face and heard Buddy's happy barks. He stepped back and let the moment wash over him. This was more than a fishing trip. This was community in its best form. Born from a challenge, but grown into something beautiful. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in golden rose, David counted his blessings. A peaceful home, loyal friends, a clear heart, and a lake that belonged to him, a place he could share or keep private as he chose, with respect from all. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and whispered a quiet thanks to the deer by the shore, the birds in the trees, and the people who had come together to set things right. In that moment, he felt the true value of standing up, not just for himself, but for everyone.